Taeho adjusted the crystalline synchronization nodes on his combat exoskeleton as the dropship prepared for atmospheric entry. The 17 luminous markings etched into his ceremonial shoulder plate caught the light, each representing a planetary system he had personally subdued for the Gull Collective. This assignment felt beneath him. Final approach to Earth coordinates, announced the ship's navigation system. Atmospheric friction commencing. The vessel shuddered as it pierced Earth's protective envelope. Taeho watched through the viewscreen as blue skies replaced the darkness of space. Unlike most worlds the Gaul had encountered, this planet teemed with life, oceans of liquid water, verdant landmasses, and sprawling settlements. Primitive yet oddly appealing. "Remember your directive," Commander Do-hyun's voice crackled through his neural implant. "Assessment only. The High Council requires detailed analysis before classification." "Understood," Taeho responded, his four-fingered hand instinctively checking his personal shield generator. "Though I fail to see why this merits a warrior of my standing." Do-hyun's tone shifted to one of rare seriousness. "Intelligence suggests anomalies with these humans. 3 preliminary survey teams failed to return complete data. The creatures appear physically unremarkable, but something about them concerns the overmind." This caught Taeho's attention. The Gull Collective's guiding intelligence rarely expressed concern about newly discovered species. Most were either immediately valuable as resources or easily subjugated. "What specific anomalies?" he asked. "Psychological patterns we cannot predict. Their historical records show behavior that contradicts our understanding of evolutionary survival imperatives. They wage wars against themselves, yet unite against external threats. They simultaneously create beautiful art and devastating weapons. The Overmind describes them as wonderfully dangerous." The ship's descent engines fired, slowing their approach toward a vast concrete landing pad surrounded by primitive aircraft. A delegation of humans waited below, their bodies protected by nothing more than fabric coverings. "Your biological shielding is unnecessary here," Do-hyun added. "Their world falls within acceptable parameters for our physiology, though the gravity is 1.3 times our standard. You may feel heavier than usual." The dropship settled onto the landing pad with a gentle hiss of equalizing pressure systems. Taeho felt the increased gravitational pull immediately as he stood. No wonder these creatures had dense musculature despite their small stature. "Final instructions?" Taeho asked, gathering his assessment equipment. "Watch everything." "Trust nothing," Do-hyun replied before disconnecting. The exit ramp descended, and Earth's atmosphere filled Taeho's sensory organs, rich with oxygen, moisture, and thousands of organic compounds. His exoskeleton automatically filtered the excess oxygen that would have been intoxicating to his natural respiratory system. 5 humans approached, 4 males and 1 female, based on their dimorphic characteristics. They wore matching blue uniforms adorned with small metallic symbols that likely indicated rank or function. Taeho's translator implant would convert their sound-based language into meaningful concepts. "Welcome to Earth," said the central figure, a male with additional decorations on his shoulders. "I'm General Gi-hun of the United Earth Defense Force. We're honored to host representatives of the Gull Collective." Taeho performed the minimal acknowledgement gesture permitted for first contact with unclassified species. "I am Assessment Officer." "Taeho, I'm authorized to evaluate your military capabilities and cultural adaptability." The humans exchanged glances that Taeho's implant couldn't interpret. Were they communicating non-verbally? He made a mental note to investigate further. The group escorted him toward a large structure, walking across the open landing area. Taeho noticed immediately how efficiently they moved, despite the gravity he found challenging. Their bodies seemed perpetually in motion, shifting weight, adjusting posture, making small hand movements while speaking. Even at rest, they pulsed, with barely contained energy. Inside the structure, more humans worked at primitive computer terminals and display screens. Most stared openly at him, another protocol violation that suggested poor discipline or excessive curiosity. A female officer approached directly, breaking formation from the group. Taeho's combat reflexes tensed, but he suppressed the reaction. This was precisely the unpredictable behavior Do Yun had warned about. "Captain Jiwoo, Special Combat Division," she said, extending her upper limb toward him, a gesture his translator identified as a customary greeting called a handshake. Tae-ho hesitated. Direct physical contact with unclassified species violated 17 different protocols. She noticed his reluctance and smoothly transitioned the motion into a different gesture, a slight bow. "We're looking forward to learning from your combat techniques," she added with a facial expression, his implant identified as a smile, a baring of teeth that paradoxically indicated friendliness rather than aggression among humans. "For your enthusiasm is noted," Tae-ho replied coolly, "though I question what benefit the goal might gain from such an exchange." Captain Jiwoo's expression didn't falter. "Sometimes the most valuable lessons come from unexpected sources. Our species hasn't survived this long by underestimating others." Something in her tone triggered Tae-ho's tactical assessment subroutines. Was that a veiled warning? These soft, unaugmented creatures with their primitive projectile weapons and combustion vehicles couldn't possibly pose a threat to the Gull Collective with its quantum weaponry and planetary conversion technology. Yet as he followed the delegation deeper into the facility, Tae-ho noticed subtle details his preliminary briefing hadn't covered. The humans moved with coordinated precision despite their seemingly casual demeanor. Their facility's design incorporated redundant systems and defensive choke points disguised as architectural features. And despite their welcoming words, he detected no weapons had been surrendered or power systems deactivated in his presence. Standard procedures when hosting representatives from superior civilizations. These humans were treating him as an equal. Or possibly as a threat. As the tour continued, Tae-ho expanded his sensory gathering beyond standard parameters. What could these fragile beings possibly teach the mighty Goal? He would complete this assessment quickly and return to assignments. Worthy of his battle record, but a thought lingered, unwelcome yet persistent. The Overmind had called humans wonderfully dangerous. In 17 conquered systems, Tae-ho had never encountered anything that deserved such a description. The desert stretched before Tae-ho like an ocean of sand and rock, painted pink and gold by the rising sun. He stood atop a rocky outcrop, his exoskeleton's environmental systems working overtime to compensate for Earth's harsh conditions. The training facility below buzzed with activity as human soldiers emerged from their barracks into the cold morning air. "Remarkable, isn't it?" said Captain Jiwoo, appearing beside him. "The Nevada test range been training soldiers here for over 2 centuries. Tae-ho's sensory implants registered the temperature at just above freezing. Your species chose a hostile environment for combat preparation. Efficient," Jiwoo laughed. "That's the point. If you can fight here, you can fight anywhere." Tae-ho watched as the humans assembled in neat rows, their breath forming small clouds in the cold air. Unlike Goal warriors who moved with perfect synchronized precision, these humans maintained formation while still exhibiting individual characteristics, adjusting equipment, speaking quietly to neighbors, shifting their weight from foot to foot. "Major." Sun-ho stepped forward, his voice amplified by a simple acoustic device. "Today's exercise simulates hostile environmental conditions. Teams will navigate 15 kilometers of terrain carrying full equipment loads. Extraction point coordinates are now being uploaded to your tactical displays." Tae-ho's implant intercepted the data transmission, basic encryption easily broken. The course would take the humans through a punishing landscape of steep ravines, unstable rock formations, and open desert with minimal cover. Each soldier carried approximately 40 kilograms of equipment. "Your warriors will require frequent rest cycles," Tae-ho observed. "Most species would find this challenge excessive." Jiwoo raised an eyebrow. "Care to join them? We've prepared comparable weight for your frame." Tae-ho considered declining. This was beneath his status as an assessment officer, but curiosity overcame protocol. "I accept your challenge." Minutes later, he stood among the human soldiers, artificial weights attached to his exoskeleton to simulate their burden. His combat systems calculated optimal energy expenditure and movement patterns for the course. The humans around him performed various preparatory rituals, stretching limbs, checking each other's equipment, consuming water and nutrient bars. A young male soldier approached him. "First time in the desert, sir? Stay hydrated. The dry air pulls moisture from you before you notice." Tae-ho stared at the human. Why would this creature offer tactical advice to a superior being? Before he could respond, a signal flare burst overhead and the exercise began. The first 3 kilometers proved unexpectedly demanding. Earth's higher gravity combined with the additional weight taxed Tae-ho's systems beyond predicted parameters. His exoskeleton compensated by drawing additional power from reserve cells, but the efficiency curves declined steadily. More puzzling was the human's behavior. Instead of spreading out to maximize individual success, they maintained cohesive unit integrity. When crossing difficult terrain, they established support positions and assisted each other over obstacles. "Keep it tight," shouted a squad leader as they approached a steep ravine. "Hand over hand down the face. Junseo anchor point, Kyungsoon belay line." Tae-ho watched in growing fascination as the humans created an improvised descent system. Gold tactical doctrine would have each warrior find their own path. The strong would succeed, the weak would fail. Natural selection made manifest, yet these humans deliberately slowed their advance to ensure all members completed each challenge. Even more baffling, they began vocalizing rhythmically as they marched across a particularly grueling stretch of open desert. "What purpose do these sounds serve?" Tae-ho asked a nearby soldier as they trudged through knee-deep sand. "Cadence keeps our steps in sync. Distracts from the pain," the human replied between verses of their chant. "Join in if you want." Tae-ho declined, focusing instead on managing his power reserves. His exoskeleton had already shifted to emergency conservation mode, something that hadn't happened since the campaign against the crystalline entities of Proxima Centauri. By the 10th kilometer, even Tae-ho's enhanced systems struggled with the combination of heat, gravity, and weight. Several humans had fallen behind, their biological limitations becoming apparent as sweat soaked through their uniforms and their breathing grew labored. What happened next defied Tae-ho's understanding of combat logic. The stronger humans began, carrying additional equipment from their struggling comrades. Squad leaders rotated their fastest members back to assist those falling behind. When one soldier twisted an ankle on loose rock, 2 others immediately created a support formation, allowing him to continue with minimal weight on the injured limb. "Why do you not leave the weak behind?" Tae-ho asked Jiwoo as she passed him, now carrying both her pack and another soldier's communications gear. "They compromise your unit's efficiency." She didn't break stride as she answered, "That's not how humans work. We're stronger together than apart." The final kilometers revealed the true gulf between Tae-ho's understanding and human reality. His exoskeleton had depleted to critical levels, forcing him to manually override safety protocols to continue. Meanwhile, the humans, despite their biological limitations, pushed forward through sheer determination. Most astonishing was their tendency to encourage rather than condemn weakness. When a soldier faltered, others shouted support rather than criticism. They shared water when canteens ran low. They told jokes during rest halts to lift spirits. As the extraction point came into view, Tae-ho observed a small female soldier, Yun-mi according to her uniform designation, supporting a much larger male whose leg had been injured by falling rock. Despite her diminutive size, she had taken on his weight plus her own equipment. "Leave me, I'm slowing you down," the injured soldier said. "It's not happening," Yun-mi replied through gritted teeth. "We started together, we finished together." Tae-ho's tactical programming struggled to process this behavior. By all logical metrics, she should abandon this damaged unit. Her own performance metrics would suffer. The injured soldier's genetic material had proven inferior. Carrying him contradicted evolutionary principles, yet she continued, step by painful step, across the final stretch of burning sand. Other soldiers who had already reached the extraction point turned back to help, forming a support network around the struggling pair. When they finally crossed the finish line, the entire unit erupted in louder celebration for this last arrival than they had for the first. Hyunmi collapsed to her knees, exhausted but smiling as medics took over care of her injured comrade. Tae-ho stood apart, his exoskeleton's power cells completely drained, forced to rely on manual locomotion systems, a humiliation he hadn't experienced since training centuries ago. Assessment Officer, Major Sunho approached, offering a container of water. "Your thoughts on today's exercise?" Taeho accepted the water, his hydration levels critically low. "Your tactics are inefficient. You compromise peak performance to accommodate weakness." "Do we?" Sunho gestured toward the extraction point where every human soldier had arrived safely despite the brutal conditions. "Looks like 100% mission completion to me." As Taeho watched Yunmi being congratulated by her fellow soldiers, something in his understanding shifted. These humans didn't succeed despite their cooperative behavior. They succeeded because of it. For the first time in 17 conquered systems, Taeho felt something unexpected: doubt. The mess hall hummed with conversation as Taeho studied the humans during their evening meal ritual. 3 days into his assessment mission, and these creatures continued to defy his expectations. He sat at a table with Captain Jiwoo and her squad, watching as they consumed their nutrient preparations with surprising enthusiasm. "Is the food acceptable?" Jiwoo asked, noticing his untouched tray. Taeho nodded. His exoskeleton had analyzed and converted the human foodstuffs into compatible compounds. "Your species invests considerable resources in flavor enhancement. The goal prioritizes efficient nutrition." "Life's too short to eat boring food," said Lieutenant Hajun, a broad-shouldered human with a scar across his left cheek. "Try the kimchi. It's got a kick to it." Taeho sampled the fermented vegetables, his sensory implants immediately flagging the capsaicin compounds. "You deliberately consume irritants that cause pain receptors to fire." The table erupted in laughter. Taeho made another note in his assessment file: "Humans derive social bonding from shared discomfort." "Speaking of pain," Taeho continued, "I've been reviewing medical data from yesterday's exercise. 8 of your soldiers required treatment for soft tissue damage, dehydration, and thermal stress injuries, yet all returned to duty this morning." Jiwoo nodded. "That's normal. You get hurt, you heal, you keep moving." "Your species continues through pain," Taeho observed. "This defies rational behavior models." Lieutenant Hajun laughed again, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "That's just being human. We call it pushing through." Taeho's analytical subroutine struggled with the concept. "Explain." Hajun considered for a moment. "When I was a kid, my father took me hiking in the mountains. We got caught in a storm, and I fell down a slope, broke my arm. We were 20 kilometers from the nearest shelter. Your father carried you," Taeho presumed. "No. He set the bone, made a splint from branches, and we walked out together. Took all night." Hajun smiled at the memory. "I cried for the first hour. After that, I just pushed through." Before Taeho could process this information, a piercing alarm cut through the mess hall. Red emergency lights pulsed along the ceiling as an automated voice announced, "Alert! Containment breach in Research Sector East. Hazardous materials detected. All personnel evacuate to designated safe zones." This is not a drill. The room erupted into controlled chaos. Humans abandoned their meals and moved with practiced efficiency toward equipment stations. Taeho's implants detected a sharp rise in their adrenal hormones, yet their movements remained coordinated rather than panicked. "What is happening?" Taeho demanded, as Jiwoo strapped on what appeared to be primitive respiratory equipment. "Xenobiology. Lab breach," she explained, checking a handheld device. "They were studying atmospheric samples from GJ6667cc. Something's leaked." Taeho accessed the facility's information network. The eastern sector contains caustic compounds that will cause severe tissue damage to unprotected biological organisms. "Evacuation is the only logical response." Jiwoo shook her head. "There are 14 researchers and support staff trapped in that sector. We need to get them out." Taeho's probability algorithms calculated rapidly. The survival chances for rescue personnel are below acceptable thresholds. The correct protocol is to seal the sector and prioritize facility preservation. But Jiwoo wasn't listening. She and her team were already moving toward the danger, not away from it. "This violates all rational self-preservation principles," Taeho called after them. Hajun paused at the doorway. "Do you coming or staying, Assessment Officer?" Taeho hesitated. His directives did not include participation in human emergency procedures, yet this presented a unique opportunity to observe their crisis response behaviors. "I will observe," he decided, activating his exoskeleton's enhanced atmospheric filters. The corridor leading to the research sector was already filling with greenish vapor that billowed from ventilation shafts. The humans moved through it with determined purpose, their improvised breathing apparatus providing minimal protection at best. Taeho followed at a safe distance, connecting to the facility's security system to access observation feeds. On multiple screens throughout the command center where he stationed himself, he watched as Jiwoo's team breached the containment doors. Inside, the situation was catastrophic. Visibility was reduced to less than 2 meters. 3 human forms lay unmoving near an overturned storage unit. Others were visible through the haze, some trying to seal the leaking containers, others attempting to reach emergency equipment. What happened next fundamentally altered Taeho's understanding of human behavior. Jiwoo's team split into pairs, each moving directly toward different trapped personnel. They improvised protection by soaking clothing in neutralizing compounds and covering exposed skin. When standard communication devices failed in the caustic atmosphere, they used hand signals and physical contact to coordinate movements. Most unexpected was their prioritization protocol. The humans did not extract their highest-ranking scientists first, as efficiency would dictate. Instead, they reached the most vulnerable individuals, those already unconscious or injured, regardless of their status or value to the research. Through one screen, Taeho watched Jiwoo and Yunmi, the small soldier from the desert exercise, crawl beneath a cloud of densest gas to reach a maintenance worker trapped by fallen equipment. The caustic atmosphere burned their exposed skin visibly, raising blisters and causing obvious respiratory distress. Yet they continued, using their combined strength to lift the debris and free the worker. On another screen, Hajun and his partner had fashioned a crude stretcher from laboratory materials and were carrying 2 unconscious researchers toward the exit, their own breathing becoming more labored with each step. Within 22 minutes, all 14 trapped personnel had been extracted. The human rescue teams were the last to exit the contaminated zone, several of them collapsing as they reached clean air. The medical area was crowded with the injured. Taeho moved among them, his exoskeleton sensors cataloging the extent of their injuries. Chemical burns covered exposed skin. Respiratory systems showed significant damage. Pain indicators were off the charts by goal standards. Yet these humans were already planning a second entry to secure the remaining hazardous materials. Taeho approached Jiwoo where medics treated her chemical burns. Her face was partially covered. With burn gel, one eye swollen shut, yet she continued issuing orders for containment procedures. "Your actions were irrational," Taeho stated. "You risked superior officers to save maintenance workers." Jiwoo looked genuinely surprised through her injuries. "They're people who needed help. Rank doesn't matter in a situation like that." "You could have died," Taeho pressed, needing to understand this behavior. "But we didn't," she replied simply. And neither did they. Taeho's analytical systems struggled with a cascade of contradictory data points. In 17 conquered systems, I have never witnessed a species deliberately increase their own suffering probability to decrease the suffering of unrelated individuals. Jiwoo studied him with her one good eye. "Is that what the goal do? Conquer systems?" Taeho realized his protocol breach too late. Revelation of collective intentions was strictly forbidden during assessment phases. "I should report to Commander." "Do-hyun," he said, withdrawing from the medical area. In his private quarters, Taeho spent hours compiling his observations. The human's behavior violated every evolutionary principle the Gol Collective had established across 2,000 years of galactic exploration. Species survived by prioritizing self-preservation, genetic advancement, and resource acquisition. The strong survived while the weak perished. Yet these humans, these fragile, unaugmented creatures, had transcended their individual survival imperatives. They risked their lives for others without calculating value returns. They suffered willingly. To reduce the suffering of others, Taeho made careful notes in his report that night. including an observation that would likely be dismissed by the Overmind as assessment error. Perhaps humans were not a species to be conquered, but one to be understood. The transport shuttle skimmed over the rugged landscape of the disputed border zone, its repulsor fields kicking up swirls of red dust. Tae-ho sat among the human delegation, his exoskeleton fully powered after the incidents at the research facility. Through the viewport, he observed the harsh beauty of the territorial boundary between Earth's solar system and the neighboring Kyr Dominion. First time in the buffer zone? Captain Ji-woo asked, her face still bearing the faint marks of chemical burns from the rescue operation 3 weeks earlier. I have participated in 78 diplomatic security operations, Tae-ho replied. Though never with a species as unconventional as yours, Ji-woo smiled. We'll take that as a compliment. Commander Do-hyun, who had arrived from the Gol flagship the previous day, leaned forward. The collective appreciates Earth's willingness to participate in these border discussions. The Kyr have traditionally respected only demonstrations of strength. Major Sun-ho nodded from the pilot's seat. That's something we understand well. History has taught us that peace works best when backed by capability. The shuttle banked sharply around a towering rock formation, revealing the diplomatic outpost nestled in a protected valley. The facility was a neutral installation, its architecture a blend of multiple species design elements: crystal spires favored by the photosynthetic Aral, pressure domes used by methane-breathing Volari, and the practical reinforced bunkers preferred by humans. Approach vector looks clear, reported Lieutenant Ha-jun from the sensor station. Though I'm reading some unusual energy signatures in the northern ridge. Tae-ho accessed the shuttle's sensor feed through his neural interface. The readings were indeed anomalous, subtle distortions that most species technology would miss entirely. Recommend altering course, he suggested. Those readings are consistent with... The sky erupted in blinding light. A massive electromagnetic pulse washed over the shuttle, instantly disabling its propulsion systems. As the craft lurched violently, Tae-ho's neural connection to the Gol command network severed completely. Brace for impact. Sun-ho shouted, fighting the manual controls as the shuttle plummeted toward the rocky surface. The craft's emergency systems engaged at the last possible moment, cushioning their descent with a desperate burst from reserve thrusters. They hit the ground hard, skidding across loose scree before coming to rest against a boulder formation. Status report, Ji-woo called out, already moving through the damaged cabin to check on injured personnel. Multiple casualties, reported Sergeant Yunmi, applying pressure to a wound on a communications officer's leg. Primary systems offline. We're dead in the air. Commander Do-hyun activated his personal shield generator, its blue field flickering weakly. Radiation bombs, military grade. They've disabled all shielded communications and quantum entanglement channels. Through the cracked viewport, Tae-ho spotted movement on the ridgelines surrounding their position. Sleek, predatory forms, moving with practiced precision. Kyr raiders, Commander Do-hyun identified, his voice tight. At least 3 battalions based on movement patterns. Our protocol dictates honorable surrender when outnumbered 4-1. The collective will negotiate our release. Tae-ho had encountered the Kyr in combat operations before. Known throughout the Galactic Arm as merciless hunters, they respected strength above all else, and were infamous for their treatment of captured enemies. Surrender would mean certain death, slow and painful for demonstration purposes. Major Sun-ho pulled himself from the pilot's seat, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. He surveyed the rocky terrain through tactical binoculars, then turned to the human soldiers, who had already taken defensive positions around the downed shuttle. We're not surrounded, he announced with surprising calm. We're in a target-rich environment. The humans responded with expressions that Tae-ho now recognized as determination rather than fear. Some even smiled as they checked their weapons and distributed ammunition. You cannot be serious, Do-hyun objected. We are outnumbered and outgunned. The Kyr forces have heavy artillery positioned on those ridges. Then we'll just have to take their artillery, won't we? Ji-woo replied, slinging a compact rifle over her shoulder. She turned to Tae-ho. Assessment officer, your combat experience would be valuable. Care to join us, or would you prefer to surrender? Before Tae-ho could respond, the first volley of Kyr energy weapons struck their position. The shuttle's remaining shields absorbed most of the impact, but sections of the hull began to glow red-hot from the sustained barrage. "We have perhaps 10 minutes before they breach our position," Tae-ho calculated, activating his exoskeletons. "Combat protocols. No reinforcements will reach us in time." "Then we don't need to hold for long," Sun-ho said, spreading a crude map across a damaged console. "We just need to change the scenario." What followed defied Tae-ho's extensive combat experience. Rather than fortifying a single defensive position as military doctrine would dictate, the humans separated into small units of 3 to 4 soldiers each. They slipped out of the shuttle through emergency hatches and maintenance ports, using the rocky terrain to conceal their movements. Tae-ho found himself assigned to Ji-woo's team, along with Ha-jun and a combat medic. They crawled through a narrow ravine, while the Kir forces concentrated their fire on the shuttle, still believing all survivors remained inside. "Your species' tactics are unorthodox," Tae-ho observed, as they reached a sheltered position behind the Kir's forward line. "Humans have been outgunned throughout our entire history," Ji-woo replied, checking her weapon. "We learned to adapt or die. Now we adapt so we don't die." At Sun-ho's signal, transmitted through simple light codes then detectable electronic communications, the human team struck simultaneously from multiple directions. They targeted command nodes and communications equipment, creating confusion among the Kir forces, who had expected a straightforward siege. The humans fought with unexpected ferocity, employing misdirection tactics Tae-ho had never encountered. They created improvised explosive devices from shuttle components. They used the terrain to channel Kir forces into kill zones. Most impressively, they coordinated their actions with minimal communication, as if operating from a shared understanding that required no explicit instructions. Tae-ho's combat exoskeleton recorded everything for later analysis as he fought alongside them. The humans' biological limitations, slower reflexes, weaker physical strength, should have made them easy prey for the Kir raiders. Instead, they compensated with astonishing creativity and cooperation. 3 hours into the battle, Tae-ho found himself separated from his team when a Kir heavy weapons platform targeted his position. The ridge where he had established a sniper nest collapsed under concentrated fire, sending him tumbling into a ravine behind enemy lines. His exoskeleton absorbed much of the impact, but critical damage to its power distribution system left him with limited mobility and failing defensive shields. A squad of Kir hunters quickly converged on his position, their bone-white armor gleaming in the harsh sunlight as they closed for the kill. Tae-ho prepared for death, activating his suit's self-destruct sequence to prevent his technology from falling into enemy hands. In his 17 campaigns, he had never faced a no-win scenario. The irony of dying alongside humans, creatures he had initially dismissed as primitive, was not lost on him. The first Kir hunter leapt into the ravine, vibroblade extended for the killing strike. Before it could reach Tae-ho, the creature's head exploded in a spray of purple fluid. Lieutenant Ha-jun appeared at the ravine's edge, his rifle smoking. Seconds later, Sergeant Eun-mi slid down the rocky slope, firing precisely at the remaining Kir hunters. Despite a severe plasma burn across her shoulder and what appeared to be a broken arm, she moved with determined efficiency. "Can you walk?" she asked, reaching Tae-ho's position. "My systems are critically damaged," he responded. "You should leave." "Me? The tactical advantage—" "Save it," Ha-jun interrupted, covering their position as more Kir forces approached. "We've got about 30 seconds before this whole area gets very hot. Let's move." Together they half-carried, half-dragged Tae-ho through a series of narrow passages in the rock formations. Enemy fire followed them, superheating the air around their heads as they finally reached a sheltered depression where other human soldiers had established a fallback position. As a medic worked to stabilize Eun-mi's injuries, Tae-ho confronted the pair. "Why risk yourselves?" The statistical probability of success did not justify the potential losses. "No one gets left behind," Eun-mi said simply, wincing as the medic applied a field dressing to her wound. She checked her weapon's charge and stood. "Not even aliens, who think we're primitives." With a nod to Ha-jun, she rejoined the battle. Tae-ho watched her go, his assessment algorithms attempting to process this behavior. By all logical analysis, these humans should have been defeated hours ago. Instead, they were systematically dismantling a superior force through sheer determination and collective action. For the first time in his long career, Taeho wondered if the Goal Collective's understanding of strength might be fundamentally incomplete. The Phi Goal flagship Eternal Dominance hung in geosynchronous orbit above Earth, its crystalline structure capturing and refracting sunlight into prismatic patterns across its hull. Inside the central command chamber, Taeho stood before the assessment review panel, his freshly repaired exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh lights. Commander Do-hyun circled the holographic display projecting scenes from the Kier ambush. The footage showed human soldiers fighting with remarkable coordination despite being outgunned and outnumbered. One clip displayed Captain Ji-woo leading a small team to capture an enemy weapons platform, turning it against its former operators, with devastating effectiveness. "This cannot be correct," Do-hyun muttered, freezing the display on an image of Sergeant Yun-mi dragging an injured comrade twice her size across open ground while under heavy fire. "Our neural engineers must examine your implants for corruption. Systems are functioning within optimal parameters," Taeho replied. "The data is accurate," the commander gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show Taeho's formal assessment document, specifically his species classification recommendation. "You recommend classifying humans as a Tier 1 species. Their technology is centuries behind ours. They have barely mastered rudimentary interplanetary travel. Their weapon systems rely on primitive chemical propulsion and limited energy projection." The assessment panel members shifted uncomfortably in their gravity chairs. In 3,000 years of Gol expansion, only 5 species had ever received Tier 1 classification, a designation that mandated alliance rather than conquest. "Technology is not their strength," Taeho explained, stepping forward to manipulate the holographic controls. The display shifted to show multiple scenes from his time among the humans. Humans possess 3 unique attributes, unseen in combination elsewhere. They think creatively under pressure, they cooperate across hierarchical boundaries, and most, dangerously, they exhibit something they call hope when facing certain defeat. He displayed recordings from the Kier ambush, highlighting tactical decision points where human behavior defied conventional analysis. "Observe how they function more effectively as their situation deteriorates. This defies all known psychological models." A senior council member leaned forward, her ancient exoskeleton creaking slightly. "Assessment Officer Taeho, your combat record is exemplary. 17 conquered systems without a single tactical error. Yet you ask us to believe that these bipedal mammals with their limited lifespans and fragile bodies represent a civilization-level threat." "Not a threat," Taeho corrected. "An opportunity." He activated a secondary display showing Earth's historical conflicts. Thousands of wars fought across millennia, countless adaptations to changing battlefield conditions. No species in our records has survived so many self-inflicted extinction-level events. They have warred against themselves with greater ferocity than any external enemy could muster, yet they consistently emerge stronger. "Primitive tribal behavior," another counselor dismissed. "Many species exhibit similar destructive tendencies during their early development." "With respect, counselor, you misunderstand," Taeho replied. "Their internal conflicts forced accelerated adaptation. While the Goal have remained essentially unchanged for 10,000 years, humans have transformed their societies completely, dozens of times, within a single millennium." Do-hyun studied the displays with growing concern. "Even if these observations are accurate, the Overmind's directive is clear. Species that cannot defend their resources become resources themselves. This is the way of the collective." The directive also states that species demonstrating exceptional adaptive potential may be considered for integration rather than subjugation, Taeho countered. "I submit that humans qualify under this provision." He displayed a final recording. Lieutenant Ha-jun and Sergeant Yun-mi risking their lives to rescue him from behind enemy lines, despite his damaged exoskeleton rendering him a tactical liability. "They had no logical reason to save me," Taeho explained, By any rational calculus, I should have been abandoned, yet they risked everything for a being they had known for less than one lunar cycle. The council chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. The Gull Collective had encountered many species with superior technology, formidable defenses, even greater physical capabilities, but none that would sacrifice themselves for strangers based on principle alone. Your recommendation? Du Hyun finally asked, his tone reflecting both resignation and curiosity. Full alliance integration, Taeho stated without hesitation. The goal have conquered through superior technology for 10,000 years. Humans have survived through adaptation and determination. Together, Taeho paused, searching for the right word. Together, we would be unstoppable, he concluded. The council chamber erupted in debate, voices rising as faction leaders argued. The implications. Some demanded Taeho's immediate neural recalibration. Others called for a full-scale invasion before human potential could fully develop. A few, primarily those with extensive field experience, listened thoughtfully. Enough, Du Hyun commanded, silencing the chamber. The assessment protocol allows for direct demonstration. Perhaps we should invite these humans to present their case personally. Already arranged, Taeho replied. Captain Ji-woo and Major Sun Ho await your summons in the diplomatic shuttle. 3 hours later, after the human delegation had departed, Do Hyun stood with Taeho in the observation dome, watching Earth rotate slowly below them. The council remains divided, Do Hyun said. Some believe your judgment has been compromised by excessive exposure to human thought patterns. And what do you believe, Commander? Taeho asked. Do Hyun was silent for a long moment. I believe that in 9,000 years of service to the collective, I have never seen a council member request a second audience with a potential subject species. Yet Elder So Jin has asked to speak with Captain Ji-woo again tomorrow. The humans have that effect, Taeho acknowledged. They change how you see the universe. A dangerous quality, Do Hyun observed. Yes, Taeho agreed, but perhaps one the collective needs after 10 millennia of stagnation. That night, as the flagship systems cycled through their regeneration protocols, Taeho completed his final assessment report. Beyond the required tactical evaluations and strategic recommendations, he added a personal note to the secure archive where assessment officers recorded their unfiltered observations. In my 3 centuries of service, I have encountered hundreds of species across 17 campaigns. I have witnessed remarkable adaptations, extraordinary intelligence, and astonishing technological achievements. Yet only humans fight harder when victory seems impossible. Only humans become stronger when broken. And only humans would save an enemy soldier simply because, as Captain Ji-woo explained, it was the right thing to do. The humans have a saying, the most dangerous creature is not the strongest or fastest, but the one that never gives up. I believe we have found that creature. And I believe the future of the collective may depend on whether we recognize this truth in time. Tomorrow, the Council votes on humanity's classification. If they choose conquest over alliance, I fear they will learn what I have learned, that humans are at their most dangerous when they appear to be defeated. The Overmind has guided us to expand across the stars for 10,000 years. Perhaps now it has guided us to the species that will help us survive the next 10,000. For the first time in my existence, I find myself experiencing something the humans call hope. Taeho sealed the report with his neural signature and gazed out at the blue-green planet below. Whatever the Council decided, the galaxy would never be the same. The humans had already changed one Goal Warrior forever, not through superior strength or advanced technology, but through the simple, radical idea that beings from different worlds could save each other, not because it was logical, but because it was right. The end.